good? We are good. And recording? All right, welcome everybody. My name is Gene Jones. I'm the Executive Director for an organization called the Southern Waste Information Exchange. In short, we're kind of like a matchmaker. We put waste generation users. We're a 501c3. In addition to our matchmaking services, we put on conferences in the environmental sector. Waste Conversion Technology Conference, Agricultural Plastic Recycling Conference, which is taking place right after this one ends in the same room that you're in right now. And then we also do the Southeast Recycling Conference. I do a PFAS forum, remediation conference, and then our management company is also in the cannabis space, and some of those conferences are a lot more fun. If you will allow me, let me make just a couple of opening comments, and we're going to get this program going right away. First off, admin. We've got the final program that you've got in front of you. We will be compiling a proceedings of all the talks. So post-event, I will send out an email to everybody with a PDF of all the presentations that you're going to see, as well as the recordings. We are recording this via Zoom. We are launching this virtually as well, but welcome virtual attendees. And then again, like I said, post-event, we'll provide that out to everybody. If you will, for those folks that are in the room, if you will please silence your cell phones right now. If you have any problems, let us know at the front desk, and we'll try to accommodate and if it gets too cold, too hot, let us know. The restrooms are actually across the walkway back into the main registration area, so if you need a break, that's where you'll need to go. And then lastly, we've got a handout table up front. And then one more thing I need to make a notice on. At the event, we will provide an attendees list. Typically, it's name and affiliation only for those folks that are general registration. The VIP registrants are going to get the full database along with the sponsors and exhibitors. So if you do not want your contact information released, please let me know, and I can extract that out. We're going to go ahead and kick this off with the opening session. But before I do that, I have to make this comment. You know, these conferences, and I don't care what conference you go to, the conferences would not be able to be put on if it weren't for the sponsors. So I want to encourage everybody that is our sponsors are in that room for the most part, with the exception of some of our affiliate sponsors that help us get the word out about the event. So I encourage you at the breaks to go in there and network with the sponsors, find out about what they do, what they offer, the services, goods, equipment that they sell, what have you. Again, if it weren't for the sponsors, we wouldn't be able to put this conference on. All our breaks are going to be in the exhibit hall, with the exception of lunch today. That's going to be outside in the terrace where we had the reception last night, and then the reception tonight is going to be in the exhibit hall. All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and kick it off with the opening session. I'm going to ask Tip Torres, who is a partner with West Group Law, to moderate this session. We're going to go ahead and kick it off. I'll go ahead and allow Scott to come up, and then Tip, if you don't mind, you can take it over from there. Our first presenter is Scott Vanderau, partner with Energy Transaction Advisors, and he's going to be talking about the current landscape of waste to high-value projects and technologies. So Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Okay, can everybody hear me? I'd like to start off by saying thank you, Gene, as he walks out the door. It's an honor to not only be able to speak at a conference like this, but also to essentially kick it off, I guess. I do want to thank Gene and his team for putting this together. I can only assume this is going to be another amazing conference. So I am Scott Vanderau. I am here representing my company, ETA, or Energy Transaction Advisors. I'm a partner at the company. A fellow partner, Richard Oliver, is also here at the conference. We have a booth. Come talk to us. We like making new friends. I am talking about the current landscape of waste to high-value products. We're going to highlight several projects and technologies. I'll start off by giving some background to this presentation. ETA maintains a database that's currently over 250 technologies deep, I guess, that we keep track of waste conversion technologies. We're specific mostly to gasification and pyrolysis technologies related to that. We're going to highlight a handful of projects from our database today. The information that I'm providing today is all publicly available. In fact, I'm pretty sure all the information in these slides have come either from company websites or press releases. And again, we're focusing on gasification and pyrolysis, not because that's by any means the only conversion technologies out there or the best, but that's because that's where our expertise lies. We are technology neutral. Myself, my company, my cohorts, we have no interest or bias toward any of the technologies we're talking about today. And importantly, this presentation should not be used for investment purposes. So just an outline, I'm going to go over the pyrolysis and gasification waste conversion pathways. We'll talk about some of the high-value products you can make via these conversion technologies. We'll talk about trends that ETA, we've been pretty active in the space for the past few years, and we're seeing some overarching trends both in feedstock and products. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll finish with an overview of technologies and projects. So when you look at waste conversion, there's a handful of pathways. There's the biochemical route. That's basically taking something that's alive, something like enzymes or microbes, and using them to decompose the waste. They can turn it sometimes into useful products, sometimes into energy. We're not going to be focusing there today. Similarly, we're not going to be focusing on combustion. That's where you take the waste and essentially burn it, turn it into largely water, CO2, and heat, and you can use that heat. But where we're focusing today is on the pyrolysis and the gasification. So when feedstock undergoes pyrolysis, it gets heated up in the absence of oxygen. It's typically lower temperature than gasification. It's a big range, somewhere between 600 F and about 1400 F. And what that does is that devolves a lot of the volatiles. It leaves behind a char product, a solid product, and then pyrolysis gas. Often when you condense those gases to room temperature, they're no longer gases, they're liquids. It's like a bio-oil or pyrolysis oil. And they can be used as upgraded to fuels. For gasification, you get to a higher temperature. Gasification typically occurs greater than roughly 1700 degrees Fahrenheit. And the way you get there generally is you add some oxygen. So you actually burn a little bit of the feedstock. And that has two purposes. One, it creates a lot of heat. The gasification reactions themselves are endothermic. They need heat to go to completion. So that gets those reactions going. It also provides water, which helps to refine some of the hydrocarbons. So if you balance, if you operate a gasifier kind of in balance, you can get a pretty high quality reformed syngas comprised mostly of hydrogen and carbon monoxide. The product syngas is actually short for synthesis gas. The reason for that is hydrogen, carbon monoxide can be used to synthesize many different further products. As you can see on the right, we have a gasifier at the top making syngas, and then there's a veritable spider web of potential products. On the left hand of the slide, we've taken those products and we've kind of grouped them into groups and ranked them from lower value to higher value. At the lower end of the value chain, we have heat and power. You can take syngas and combust it or burn it. You can make heat, steam, power. If you want to get a little more value out of your syngas, you can make fuels. You can catalytically react hydrogen and CO to make synthetic methane, renewable natural gas. You can also put it through a Fischer-Tropsch process where you take and you make long-chain hydrocarbons. They can further be refined into drop-in transportation fuels such as gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. You can also take the carbon monoxide portion of the syngas and catalytically react it through a water-gas shift reaction and make additional hydrogen, which can then be purified and sold either as a fuel or further upgraded to chemicals such as nitrogen-based fertilizers. And finally, if you look at the bottom portion of that graphic, you see methanol. You can make methanol from syngas, and then methanol itself can then be further processed into a wide variety of specialty chemicals. These are typically kind of niche markets, smaller markets, but on a dollar per pound or dollar per ton basis, these products can be worth quite a bit more than the others. So like I said, Energy Transaction Advisors, we've been pretty active in this space over the past 2 to 3 years, and talking not only, building our database, talking to technology providers, talking to project developers, but also talking to clients and potential clients. So we've noticed a few kind of overarching trends. The first of which is in feedstock. There's an immense amount of interest in this industry right now in biomass, and specifically waste biomass. We think that's largely driven by 2 factors. One is when you use biomass as your feedstock, the CO2 that you create is biogenic. It doesn't count toward the carbon intensity score of the products. The carbon intensity score is essentially how much anthropogenic CO2 is released in the use of your product. So in power, it's pounds per kilowatt hour. Fuels, it's pounds per MMBTU, things like that. So the lower the carbon intensity these days, the more value you get for your product. There's also a handful of incentives for low carbon intensity products out there issued by governments and states. The second driver that we're seeing in waste biomass is a lot of people are interested in biochar. I said when you put biomass or another waste through processes like gasification and pyrolysis, you typically have 10 to 20% of the carbon that's unreacted that ends up in that solid form. And when you use biomass, that solid form is called biochar. That it's actually depending on its composition and its purity, can be used favorably as a fertilizer. It's a soil amendment. And when you do so, the carbon that's contained in that biochar is considered to be sequestered. And as we know, through the IRA, there's incentives to sequester carbon. And so a lot of people are interested in the carbon sequestration properties of biochar. The carbon that's in biochar is in its elemental form generally. So when you convert the elemental form into a carbon credit, you get approximately 3 times the weight of carbon credits as you do biochar because of the molecular weight difference between carbon and carbon dioxide. Generally speaking, compared to other wastes, waste biomass doesn't need the pre-sorting that things like MSW and waste plastics need, so it's a little bit more favorable as a feedstock compared to other wastes, although there are still some technical challenges. I mean, if you're looking at large projects, sourcing a homogeneous supply of biomass that lasts 20 to 30 years can be quite challenging. And all biomasses kind of create a difference. So different biomasses can react very differently in different gasification technologies. So if you're looking at developing a project on waste biomass, you almost need to run like a pilot scale version of that biomass to see not only what the biochar looks like, but what the syngas will look like. Excuse me. For trends in products, we're seeing a lot of interest in fuels. Again, we think that's mostly driven by low carbon fuel standards in many different states, but it's also driven because you can make drop-in fuels via these processes, and you can take advantage of large established markets. So if you're looking at selling biodiesel or renewable gasoline or renewable natural gas, you're probably not going to have a very hard time finding a credit-worthy off-taker that'll sign up for long-term off-takes. So that's driving a lot of the interest. However, there's a little bit of technology risk with the fuel production. For renewable natural gas, the technology risk isn't as much. The methanation portion, going from syngas to methane, is relatively well understood. There's commercial plants around the world that are doing it. But there, it's really the integration problem. Currently, there are no biomass to renewable natural gas projects in operation in the United States at a commercial level. So there's a little bit of technology risk there. And then as far as the liquid fuels for the Fischer-Tropsch portion, there's a handful of companies that have technologies in that arena that are out licensing their technology. But again, there's no commercial biomass to Fischer-Tropsch liquids in production currently. Another product we're seeing interest in is hydrogen. Again, there's low carbon hydrogen incentives under the IRA. I think that's driving a lot of the interest. From a technology standpoint, hydrogen's actually simpler than a lot of the other products because, like I mentioned before, you can do a water gas shift to get pure hydrogen. And the hydrogen purification, you typically use a pressure swing absorber. Those technologies are in use all over the world. With hydrogen, it's really the market. So there's a lot of interest, but the markets haven't been built out. It's kind of a chicken and egg. People want to supply hydrogen, but they don't have anyone to sell it to, and the people who want to buy it haven't put in the infrastructure because the supply isn't there. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. And then finally, I mentioned biochar. We're getting a lot of calls about, hey, how do I make biochar? I want the carbon credits. Again, that market is in its infancy, so finding long-term offtake for biochar in today's market can be problematic. So now let's get to the technologies. Again, this is a a very small sample from our relatively large database of such projects and technologies. And Richard and I put our heads together and said, hey, we want to get a sampling of projects that shows a diversity in feedstock, a diversity in conversion technology, and a conversion in products. And so hopefully we've done that with this short list. If you want a copy of this list, we're happy to share it. Stop by our booth and we can give you a Excel format. But I'll just jump right in. I'll start with a slide that has 3 different projects on it. So a company called Strategic Biofuels is developing a project they call Louisiana Green Fuels. Velocis, a Fischer-Tropsch technology provider, is developing biofuels. And USA Bioenergy is developing the Texable Renewable Fuel Project. And the reason I lump these all into one slide is because they're all very similar. They're all relatively large biorefineries looking at producing 2,000 plus barrels per day of carbon negative fuels. They're all using waste biomass. Each of these projects are located kind of in the southern US Gulf region where there's a lot of waste from forest thinning. So they're using that as a feedstock. They're all self-generating power via biomass. And so they're building, in some cases, 80 plus megawatt power plants to provide the parasitic load for the gasification and refining portions of the plants. And they've all, they're all capturing and sequestering the carbon. So they're taking waste biomass and making carbon negative fuels. There's a lot of interest in carbon negative fuels. As you can see here, there's a lot of companies that are placing money and making big bets on it. So we're excited to see how this space evolves. Next, we have the San Joaquin Renewables Project. This is Frontline Bioenergy. That's a California company. They've announced a project in McFarland, California that'll convert ag waste, wood waste, and almond and pistachio shells into renewable natural gas. Frontline has a patented gasification and gas cleanup technology, and they've recently completed some pilot testing. They have a pilot plant in Iowa that is actually a fully integrated pilot plant. So a lot of times gasification technologies will do a pilot plant where they prove their gasification technology. However, Frontline went the extra step to fully integrate it. So they have a pilot plant that you can feed waste biomass and get out pipeline quality natural gas. Next is Char Technologies. This is a Canadian company. And they have a high temperature pyrolysis process. And what that means is in their process, they reach essentially similar temperatures to gasification. However, they do so without the addition of an oxidant. So they don't need pure oxygen. And so that means that they don't need an air separation unit. That can be potentially a large economic advantage as air separation units are not only capital intensive, but they have high operating costs. But because they reach those high temperatures, they still make a high quality, relatively high hydrogen syngas. So they can make products such as heat and power, but they can also go to the higher value products such as RNG and green hydrogen. Char has taken the biochar component, the solid component, and they market it not as biochar, but as biocoal. You can see a picture of it down there on the bottom left. They trademarked the name Clean Fire, and the markets they're chasing here are kind of harder to decarbonize industries and plants that burn a coal, where they say you can come and blend this Clean Fire and reduce your emissions from your coal-fired process. Another area that they're very interested in is biosolids, and so they're processing biosolids in their technology, and they've gone the extra step to do the appropriate testing to ensure that they can destruct PFAS, or forever chemicals. I'm sure that we're all aware that that's a existing and growing problem, and I think we're actually going to hear a little bit about that more over the course of the next couple days. Char has partnered with Synagro to build their first waste-to-energy demonstration project, and I believe that project is currently in commissioning, so hopefully we'll get to see their technology operating at a commercial scale pretty soon. Next, we have Aloha Carbon, and I believe someone from Aloha Carbon is here at the conference, and they're going to present on this project, and I'm excited to hear about it. I hope this is pronounced Smurf, because that's what I've been saying, but they're developing a sustainable materials recycling and fertilizer facility in Hawaii. And this is essentially landfill diversion. So in islands like Hawaii, we know landfills are always a concern. And so they're developing a project where they take construction and demolition waste, landscaping and invasive plant waste, poultry manure, and biodiesel waste, and they're sending that through a processing facility and ultimately sending a portion of that to a gasifier where they're making green power and fertilizer in the form of potash and biochar. So I'm really excited to hear more about this project. Next, we have Heartland. They have a technology called the Heliostorm gasifier. This is a high temperature plasma gasifier, and plasma arc is one way you can gasify waste. You have plasma torches that basically heat up the feedstock. What Heartland has done is they've developed what they call a free expanding arc reactor. So they've done away with the actual plasma torch, which saves heat loss. And you can see in the picture they have a circular reactor, and they have electrodes around the circumference of the reactor. And those electrodes create a free expanding arc inside there. And not only does it save on heat loss, but they claim they can get higher temperatures than traditional plasma arc gasification. Traditional plasma arc gasification is roughly 5,000 to 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and Heartland claims they can get up to 18,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's very hot, obviously. At those temperatures, you're not really gasifying, you're really ripping the molecules down into their elemental constituents. And then as it cools, those elements find the lowest energy thermodynamic state, which for hydrocarbons is typically hydrogen and carbon monoxide. So it's a long way of saying they can likely process a variety of different wastes and produce a clean, pure syngas. Heartland does have a commercial scale pilot unit operating in Tennessee where they can test different feedstocks. And Heartland is not just a gasification company, they're also a water treatment company. So they have a PFAS concentrator technology that they're planning to marry with their Heliostorm gasifier. So they can take dirty water that has a lot of waste and PFAS in it. They can concentrate it into a biosolid, and then they feed the biosolid to this Heliostorm gasifier to destroy not only the waste, but the PFAS that's in that waste. This is another company that's gone the extra mile with their pilot plant to test that they can actually destroy the PFAS. And so that's an interesting technology we're watching. Next is Freepoint Ecosystems. This is a waste plastic recycling technology. This is a company that is looking to take waste plastics and convert them into plastic feedstocks. So they claim they can process a wide variety of plastics, almost any type, and they use a pyrolysis unit to turn those waste plastics into a pyrolysis oil. They have technology that can take that pyrolysis oil and further refine it, purify it, stabilize it, and essentially create low-density polyethylene granules, which is a feedstock for plastics. Freepoint has announced a collaboration with Renewi in Europe, and they're currently underway on their first commercial scale plastics recycling plant in Belgium. And finally, we have Alder Renewables. This is an interesting technology. They take biomass and put it through a pyrolysis unit and make bio-oil, but then they have their patented ARC, or Alder Renewable Crude technology, which takes that bio-oil and essentially stabilizes it. And they've done lab testing to show that their stabilized bio-oil can be a drop-in replacement for conventional crude refining. So you can take a petroleum-based refinery, bolt on ARC technology at the front of it, and you can take a refinery that's currently producing gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and you can produce green gasoline, biodiesel, sustainable aviation fuel. So that's a pretty cool concept. They received DOE funding last year, and they just within the last couple months opened a new facility in Colorado that includes a fully integrated pilot plant. So those are the technologies. Feel like I was talking really fast. We wanted to get through a variety of different technologies with varied feedstocks and products. Hopefully we gave you a picture of that. Just a brief discussion about ETA, what we do. We work with, we perform due diligence for lenders on projects like this. We perform development assistance for people developing these projects. A lot of times people call us up and ask us for feasibility studies. They say, hey, I have this waste, I don't know what to make, and I don't know what technology to use to make it. So in helping our clients provide solutions to our clients in those arenas, we feel it's important for us at ETA to keep appraised of what's happening in this industry. There's a lot happening, there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of excitement. That's why we keep our database, and it's also why we come to conferences like this. I mean, it's truly an honor to be able to stand up here and tell you what we're seeing in the industry. But as I look around the room, I see familiar faces and friends. I see a lot of people I don't know. And going through the program, I see a lot of people who have technologies that are innovating in this industry. I see people who are developing projects, and maybe developing projects in ways that we haven't thought of before. So I truly look forward to meeting new people, saying hi to some old friends, and learning a lot at this over the next 2 days. So stop by our booth, say hello. We're happy to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was it. Let's see. Hello? Is this one on?
That one is.
Everybody? I can operate nuclear weapon systems, but I cannot make a microphone or something. So, that's excellent presentation, and it's so important for so many of us in the room to see the status of the development of the technologies and what states they're in based on feedstock, what we're looking at for offtake, what we're looking at for electrical or fuel offtake, what we're looking at for residual offtake. So that was very informative. Thank you. We have time now for questions. You motored through that in such a period of time. We have one opportunity, 10 minutes for questions, so we'd love to hear from some folks in the audience. Oh, the questions are at the end of all four sessions? Okay, I can understand that from Eugene.
Show the last slide. Back to the last slide.
I don't think I can. Was there something specific you were looking for?
Where are you guys based?
Oh, I'm out of Denver, Colorado, and my partner Richard's out of Houston, Texas.
Thank you.
Sure. I'll leave the clicker up
I'm watching my phone here to make sure I keep everybody on time. So by happenstance, I just get to be the next speaker. My name is Steve Torres. I'm a partner at West Group Law. We have offices in New York, Boston, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. We represent government agencies in the area of environmental construction and litigation. We do everything from permitting new projects and new technologies like this to advising cities, towns, counties, and state agencies when they build complex projects and also building construction. So I'm excited to be part of this conference. I think I've been coming here for almost 20 years, and as you said, there are a lot of folks that have been here that time as well, and a lot of new faces. It's an exciting time, I think, in the industry. And we'll talk a little bit about just why that is in this presentation. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the, if I move a little bit so I can see so a little bit about the constraints and the contaminants that are impacting our industry as we navigate the regulatory and the policy framework. We're not limited to regulatory frameworks. We're limited to policy frameworks because a lot of the permitting agencies for these projects sometimes act, as we say, ultra vires in Latin, outside the authority, outside the statute, outside the regulations to develop their own policies towards different processes and technologies. So we see a lot of that. So we operate not just in a regulatory landscape, but in many states a policy standpoint. Not necessarily unjustifiably, because by what we call enabling authorities, statutes and regulations, these agencies are given the authority to enact policies that really dictate what we do with our waste. So one of the first areas we'll talk about, and then, wait, that one's forward, let me go. We're going to try and get through some of the constraints. We're going to try and get through some of the regulatory framework that is impacting us now. And then we're going to talk to you a little bit about the marriage of the things that each of you do and that some of our clients do, and that is the public-private partnerships. I'm going to be very brief on P3s because we have an excellent presentation for our friend from Los Angeles on the owner's perspective on those P3s. So I've abbreviated a couple of my slides on the P3s. And then, of course, I'll talk about the two big factors, pricing and the performance. The constraints and the contaminants that we see right now in this industry, and we've been trying to help all of you develop emerging technologies, traditional technologies in waste to energy, or energy from waste, as I call it in my European context, for a number of years now. And we see the same factors recurring. But now we have some new factors. I call it the zero factors, the zero emissions and zero waste, which wasn't present when all of us started out in this industry. This is a development we see in policies. So the zero emissions and zero waste will impact what we are doing, but also now we're seeing a development. We've always had the EJ requirements, but some of the states are expanding those, and very importantly, and very rightly so, that we contain operations and impacts to these areas. Let me just make sure I have my timer going for myself. How about that? I can moderate others' behavior, but as my young days out here on Mission Beach will tell you, I really can't moderate my own. So I do want to make sure I stay on time. So environmental justice and a new thing we call disadvantaged communities. We heard about the Inflation Reduction Act just a few moments ago. A lot of the new federal statutes are coming with expanded environmental justice, disadvantaged community requirements, funding sources, even if it's not in the statute, a lot of time funding sources can tie funding to non-regulated factors that become then policy driven, and then you get additional funding or don't get funding based on that, so that's important. And then of course PFAS and emerging contaminants, we'll spend a little bit of time on that today because we're seeing that development is actually fostering what I call the rebirth of our thermal industry. I think we saw the thermal industry come in. As a matter of fact, my partners were on a project in Los Angeles back in the mid-2000s and with New York. New York was doing it as well, looking at the initial round of thermal conversion technologies as a solution then. And of course we saw with the economic scalability and some of the other opportunities that slowed. But now with the ideas we'll talk about later on, the destruction and disposal practices for PFAS, we're seeing essentially an opportunity for a rebirth of the thermal industries when we look at waste feedstocks, biosolids, and biomass, and municipal solid waste, C&D. So we're going to see another opportunity of that, which is exciting. I had to throw in, I don't think I get through a presentation without talking about sailing. It's in my blood. That's a picture of, if you get up to Newport, Rhode Island, you get to see these. We're out there sometimes and they'll zip by us. That's a 12-meter America's Cup. That's sail number 30, which is Freedom, 1980 under Dennis Conner. At the bar afterwards, or cigars, I'm happy to tell a couple of Dennis Conner stories that I can't tell up here with some of my crew, but it's exciting. So the zero factor, what are we talking about? We're talking about understanding zero emissions policies, which, like anything else, there are exceptions and there are timelines. You see a lot of the states enacting climate legislation and responsibly so, and they have zero emission goals, but you have to look at what are the offsets are allowable, what are zero emissions, what are the carbon programs that are covered, and how do you capture or how do you make sure that your project can either meet the requirements, fit into one of the exceptions. Of course, we're looking at projects that we fund over 25 or 30 years, and we're looking out at climate legislation that says, well, in 25 years, we're going to have emissions that meet this, and some states are looking at zero net. So what is net and how do we get around net? Those are some of the things we help clients understand with, because how are we going to have our finance folks, I was talking to one just a little while ago, how are we going to have folks finance these projects over 25 years if in fact the technology is going to have a stack that's then not in compliance? So we have to work through these issues. So that's a zero emissions factor. And the zero waste. What truly is zero waste? Some states and some folks, policy folks, will tell you that it's not zero waste if you're taking your tailings and putting them through a thermal process. Even though US EPA, which is really should be guiding the states, US EPA says no, recovery of energy is in the hierarchy. It's above end disposal in landfills. And so there's a value for that practice. So that should, in our minds, count as zero waste. So those are some of the things we talk about as the constraints, and those factors are things that we have to look at when we represent government agencies, because we have the dual role of trying to help government agencies not only understand the regulations, but also to maximize the opportunity to develop projects under the existing policy standpoint. And for all of you that are industry providers, you certainly want to come to town to a government agency where they know how to get to yes. Getting to yes is so important, both from a permitting standpoint, but also when each of you are bringing your technology to that government agency, you need a government agency that not only will be a champion of your project, but won't be, as we say, too greedy. You want to make sure everybody understands the risks, the rewards. We'll talk about that. I'm going to leave that a lot from the presentation later on, talking about the shared risks and rewards of these P3s, so that we can get to yes on the contract deal. Can we get to yes on permitting? Can we get to yes on the contract? And that a lot is the strength of the P3 relationship. and the sophistication of the public owner in working with you in getting your technology to yes, but also getting your business deal to yes, so that it works for everybody. I try to explain to my public sector clients, both in projects like this and also in construction litigation, which I do a lot of, that there's always a number. There's always a project cost, there's always a margin, and then there's a little room for negotiating over risk, reward, and share. But responsible business folks at a table can get to that yes by understanding that the pie is a circle, the pie can be derivatively sliced, but in the end, as long as you're fair and you share the risk and reward, you can get to that yes. And that's all we want to do as public owners. And that's what we want to do as advocates in the industry, get those deals ahead. So this is what we look at, some just examples here of zero waste by some of the states that we see. Here's what some of the states are doing. You'll see goals that were set for certain years, and the fun thing to do, I like graphs, I like to have a little status and see where some of these policies are with respect to meeting those goals, and some of them continue to push them back. Some of them adjust them. In New York, recycling has plateaued over 2 solid waste master plans. If you look at the statistics, and that's why they're changing what they name the solid waste master plan, this time around in New York. Massachusetts, the same thing. Massachusetts 20 years ago was zero export of waste was their goal, and they would never achieve that because guess what? They couldn't get to yes on these projects. They could not do any expansion of waste energy. They were doing no expansion of landfills, though we just got a landfill expansion, vertical, horizontal, permitted in Massachusetts after 20 years of them talking about, zero increase in landfill footprint, both vertical and horizontal. It was doable. So these policies and these goals sometimes are not always what happens in practice. I'm going to make sure I'm on the right. So these are, and then of course the next one I'll talk about briefly. I'm sure all of you are many of you are dealing with it in your projects, and that is PFAS. The PFAS is a major factor in 3 federally regulated statutes that we look at. We're looking at clean air, clean water, and clean up, as I call it, CERCLA, which is essentially the Superfund statute. So you're seeing activity in all 3 of those areas that we'll talk about briefly today. And this is why it's important. What I want to point out here is that there's that's us on the bottom, the landfill. Those are the places where we want to divert biosolids and municipal solid waste from. So we see the PFAS occurrence in the environment. This is funny here. I like this. Airports and military sites. They're always blaming us. They always say we have more contamination on our military sites than a lot of other places. And I know it can be the case. I had fun at one of these years ago. I was at I think it was a design and construction conference I was speaking at with a nice table like this with some wonderful folks. I think we were in Austin, Texas. And apparently one of the fellows does not read the biographies or the syllabi for his fellow speakers, because he was explaining how hard it is to get military base commanders not only to understand design build construction, because it's a different way of thinking, but by the time you get them up to speed, they're moving, because military commanders, you leave every 2 or 3 years. And then he said, and I quote, "And you know how hard it is to try and talk with someone that all they're trained to do is blow things up and kill people." And I got a kick out of that, so unfortunately I went after him, so I got to roast him a bit, and I said, apparently he doesn't read his co-speaker's biographies, because if he did, he'd realize that the speaker right after him was one of those people who was unfortunately trained to blow things up and kill people, and thank God we didn't have to do that. But it was just like, read your speaker's bio. That's how I know what we're going to hear from Los Angeles today. That's Kawsar is going to speak on that shortly on P3, so I abbreviated my P3 slides to say, okay, I'm going to spend more time on my regulation and my funny stories than on P3. So very, very important to read those. So then we see, I'm sure you're all hearing the PFAS toxicity, and this slide goes into a little bit of that, spends more time on that. But I remember when I was younger, wasn't that long ago, a little kid, New England, we were told the next ice age was coming. So I had to worry about that. Here's a little kid running around, well, the other kids had the fire trucks. I think I was running around with my slide rule, but I was running around. And then the next thing, I'm out here in LA living for a while, and then we were worried about El Nino-fueled fires you folks have out here, which have gotten horrifically worse, as I can see from when I was a kid. So we worried about the fires. Then my last year of school, prepping for college, and all of a sudden this exciting topic I had to talk about in debate club called acid rain. So then, of course, nervous type me, I'm worried about acid rain. Glad I'm not on the West Coast anymore, although I went back there for college. I don't want to get burned in the fire and the acid rain. So just when I thought everything was calmed down, then we get climate change. So you have me worried about that, and that wasn't enough. We add PFAS. So we have a lot to think about, and thank God we have our government, to regulate it. So all those litany of things. Can you imagine growing up and all these things are either hearing from the newspaper, TV, or your parents? So my parents could say, whether they were always reminding me before, of the various STDs that were out there in the world. And I don't know if that was more for my evangelization or my celibacy, but they had me worrying about more things than environmental factors. So let's look at the regulatory landscape briefly. These are what we see as the major areas on the regulatory landscape that are going to affect all of us. PFAS, the forever chemicals, cracking down on effluent in the wastewater treatment plant operation, the effluents and the offtake. What you'll see, I like to talk to people about, is a comparative approach to differing states. We know that differing states, both philosophically, whether politically, they take different approaches. Maine was an example. Is anybody here from Maine? Maine with the ban on biosolids into landfills immediately after the PFAS scare. They thought that was going to be the solution. Michigan, anybody here from Michigan? Michigan, much better approach. Michigan said, let's survey all 120 or so wastewater treatment plants. Let's see where the high concentration of PFAS is. Let's see where, and of course, RCRA, we haven't completed the risk assessment under RCRA yet. There are MCLs out on the water side of the house. They're working on the effluent standards there, obviously. But Michigan looked at it differently. So let's look at the wastewater treatment plants that have, based on known science, levels of PFAS that are in excess of what we start needing to worry about. And then they said, we're going to isolate those plants. We're not going to let them land apply solids. But the other plants that don't have those levels, they can continue to make these valuable products that you were talking about with fertilizer earlier. So two different approaches, one more responsible than the other. Michigan looking at the source, the violators, and saying, okay, we're going to let people continue to make this valuable product, these land-applied biosolids, whether you're looking under the EPA regs, type 1, type 2, some state regs, Class A, Class B, biosolids, the standards for Class A, Class B, Type 1, Type 2, all very, very, very similar. But in Maine, they just don't let you land apply biosolids anymore. They don't let biosolids go into landfill, which has created a problem for mixing, in the landfills. So those are some of the concerns with that. Environmental justice and climate distribution, so important when we look at our communities where we've traditionally built some of these facilities, whether by happenstance or by design. We need to make sure our facilities don't impact communities and disadvantaged areas, and that we're fair in our distribution of the siting. Siting, as you all know, siting can kill a project, now even more so. And of course, where do we tend to site on? We site on sites that are already site assigned or permitted for solid waste or biosolids activity, and guess where they are? They're in the communities where they shouldn't have been, and certainly can't be now. So siting becomes one of our challenges and constraints. So those are some of the important areas I wanted to focus on. I'm going to skip now. I'm watching my time because I certainly don't want to go over. I think I've got another 5 minutes, which is just about right. So here you look, EPA has taken a number of actions in phased fashion, of course, with the rulemaking process. So you see that we have, these are some of the activities that you can read at your leisure that they're already using. or taking action on with respect to PFAS. Certainly, this is always fun. I love my Venn diagrams. Let's differentiate. Sometimes all A's are not B's. So we differentiate between hazardous substance, which is under CERCLA, hazardous constituent under RCRA, and hazardous waste under RCRA. Essentially, the hazardous constituents can grow up to become hazardous waste and hazardous substances regulated under CERCLA. And then you have, when it's regulated under CERCLA, obviously the Superfund requirements for cleanup and liability. That's a course in itself. But when they're regulated under RCRA, then you have your cradle-to-grave requirements. And again, triggering the rebirth of the thermal industry. So I'm going to skip right through these regulatory slides to make sure I get to everything. The very important thing about the PFAS that I wanted to focus on today, let me just make sure I keep up. Here's our federal regulatory scheme. You look at subtitle C and D, hazardous waste versus regular waste, and that's where the categorization is going to come once RCRA completes its risk. They complete their risk assessment on RCRA for the biosolids, and they continue to add hazardous constituents to the list and promote those to hazardous substances and hazardous waste under the varying statutes. So that gives you just a general idea of the framework, that we work within. Now, this is the key that impacts our industry, and I wanted to make sure I was able to spend a little bit of time on today. These are the demolition. You can tell I'm a construction lawyer too by nature. The disposal and destruction strategies for PFAS, the US EPA, and this is what I have to remind a couple of the different states that I practice in that aren't excited about thermals. That the US EPA is not only telling us that waste energy recovery and fuel recovery is in the hierarchy, they're also telling us when you look at this new PFAS problem that this little kid is worried about, you have to look at destruction technologies, which are thermal technologies. And you have to look at the fact that low temperature thermal technologies may not be the best because that incurs issues that you also are concerned about, and that is emissions. So what are the technologies that are going to work here? So the key for this is that they have looked at 3: underground injection, landfill, and thermal technologies. So obviously underground injection, you've seen that done in other industries, and it sounds dangerous, but evidently the scientists tell us that it's far enough below the Earth's surface that it's not of tremendous concern, but some of us still get uneasy about putting anything back into Mother Earth that may have derivatively come from there in one fashion or another, but certainly is not there now. So that's one of the items. The landfill, of course, landfills are closed-loop systems if they're lined landfills, which they have to be for the last 20-something years. But then you have a thing called leachate, and that leachate has to go where? To the wastewater treatment plants, who will then have that leachate, go through the solids train and the liquids train, and then you'll see that the PFAS will come back out and need to go somewhere. And where does it go? Oh, it goes to a landfill. The biosolids will go to the landfill, or there are some biosolids facilities that use thermal processes. The old incinerators, a lot of them went out of regs in 2014 with the changes, so they abandoned that practice of using the older incinerators if they didn't upgrade them, so there are a lot fewer. So where are they going? The biosolids are going to the landfills. So these so the landfill may not be the perfect solution. Again, that's why I see the rebirth of this industry, the importance of this industry. We work in both, biosolids and waste industries. We see the cross-section there, and we're seeing also the opportunity for the thermal technologies, not just in the MSW phase area, but also in the biosolid space. And we saw that from the presentation before mine. So the interim guidance also asks the managers of these solid waste facilities to go ahead and collect some information for us. That's PFAS. I'm just going to move a couple through because I see I'm running closely out of time. Let me jump right over to the public-private partnerships. This is the beauty of it. It's a shared relationship of risks and rewards. We see from representing public owners that this is the key to being successful. You need to manage all 3 of these areas. We sometimes call it the 3 Ps of P3s. It's procurement, price, and performance, ensuring performance security. But really, there's one more. There's a fourth P, and that's political will. You really have to have the political will to do these projects, which is very important. And we talk on this slide about managing stakeholder relationships. So the reason I framed this presentation as I did, taking the current state of the industry, taking the constraints on that industry, and then what are the opportunities. And that's why I put P3. Normally, the generators of the biosolids, the generators of the solid waste are government agencies, municipal agencies. So many of these projects are going to be done under a P3 model. And that's why we worked P3s into a presentation on the status of the industry, the status of regulation in the industry, and where do we go from here. And the P3 is a perfect example of how to do that. One of the things you have to look at, though, is procurement. And in your state, or jurisdiction. I know we have sometimes, a lot of times at this presentation, we have folks from Canada. You need to look at the procurement authority of the place where you want to locate your facility. Can you directly negotiate with them? Do they have to go out for an RFP in order to have it? So the state's enabling legislation tells us what a city, town, or county, we represent a lot of counties in New York, what that county can do with respect to securing services or a lease or a technology provider to operate existing facilities. The procurement law of that state is what is important, and whether or not they have the authority to do that and how they do it. So if you knock on someone's door, you think they have a nice site for a project, and they say, well, we can't direct negotiate, but we need to do an RFP. Well, your best bet is to give them an RFP that's designed for your industry, your technology, and work with them on developing something like that. A number of them will come to folks like us that do that regularly and say, okay, what do we do on this? And then we help municipalities structure those RFPs so they can maximize the opportunity to comparatively evaluate varying technologies and understand their risks. So this is that slide. Let me go back there. So this is one I talk about getting to yes. That's why I highlight that. We talk about getting to yes. These are some of the performance issues that I think are important in putting that deal together. But again, it's a fair balance of risk and reward. And this, on the pricing, these are all the different sources of funding. There's a heck of a lot more now than there were, and there's also conditional funding that you have to look out for. So pricing. So you start with procurement, pricing, performance, securing the deal, and then you have an effective P3. So that's where I'm going to stop. I went into, I believe, 22 minutes. My apologies. And then we're going to do questions at the end. Now I go back to my moderator duties, and our next presentation is going to be called Closing the Gap, a public-private approach to infrastructure. And we're lucky to have with us from the Los Angeles, as an engineer, Kawsar Vazifdar, and she is going to take over from here.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Kawsar Vazifdar, and I am a civil engineer at the Environmental Programs Division at Los Angeles County Public Works. And today I will be providing an overview on the implementation of Los Angeles County's organic waste diversion programs and share our infrastructure development strategy. As Steve mentioned, I will highlight how a public-private approach can provide opportunities for jurisdictions to bridge the infrastructure gap and share lessons learned to help other jurisdictions identify infrastructure development opportunities and navigate through the complexities of the development process. So I will begin with a brief overview of how waste is managed in LA County, and then share information on our efforts to reduce organic waste disposal and develop new organic waste management infrastructure, and how the county is leading regional collaboration on this front. I'll talk about some of the challenges with infrastructure development that we're encountering as we work on pre-development for a proposed anaerobic digestion facility. And then to help other jurisdictions going through this process, I'll share what we've learned from site selection, pursuit of funding opportunities, feedstock availability, and stakeholder engagement. And last, I'll talk about some of the county's efforts to identify new sites for additional infrastructure development. Los Angeles County Public Works leads solid waste management issues in Los Angeles County, including advising the Board of Supervisors on all county-wide waste matters. So we're responsible for providing trash and recycling collection services to residents and businesses in the unincorporated areas of the county. We are responsible for assisting other county departments, such as regional planning and public health, with permitting of solid waste facilities. And also, we're responsible for planning for adequate landfill disposal capacity and organic waste processing capacity countywide. And last, we also implement waste reduction and recycling programs in the unincorporated areas as well as countywide, such as household hazardous waste collection, mattress collection, tire recycling, and more. So I don't know if all of you are from California, but if you're not, we have some new legislation in the state of California called Senate Bill 1383. And so this legislation requires the state to reduce methane emissions. And in order to accomplish that goal, there are requirements for the state to reduce organic waste disposal. And as a result of this legislation, regulations have been adopted with a lot of requirements for local jurisdictions to help achieve that goal, to reduce organic waste disposal. It includes things like recovering edible food from businesses, providing organic waste collection services for all residents, businesses, and local government facilities, developing infrastructure to process all of that organic waste that we're collecting, which is what I'll be talking about today. And then in addition to that, to help further support infrastructure development, local jurisdictions are also required to procure recovered organic waste products like compost, mulch, renewable natural gas, etc. And last, we're also required to conduct robust community education and outreach. So SB 1383, it requires counties to submit capacity planning data to our state agency that manages solid waste, which is called CalRecycle. So we need to look at our capacity for edible food recovery and organic waste processing. So in Los Angeles County, our most recent analysis was for 2025 to 2034. And some great news is that this analysis projected that we will have more than enough capacity to recover edible food from businesses and provide it through nonprofits to feed people that are experiencing food insecurity. However, the capacity report also compared the amount of organic waste that jurisdictions, such as cities and unincorporated county, are projecting that they're going to dispose with the amount of organic waste processing capacity that they have available to them. And this analysis showed that the jurisdictions are projecting to dispose 4.5 million tons of organic waste, and that they need an additional 900,000 tons per year of processing capacity to handle this projected disposal. So the Los Angeles region, we are making progress in developing this infrastructure, but as you can see, based on these projections for the next 10 years, we still have a ways to go. So this is a map showing a few of the commercial scale anaerobic digestion or co-digestion facilities in the region. Some of them have potential plans to expand, and the city of Long Beach is also exploring the feasibility of developing an anaerobic digestion facility at the former site of their Southeast Resource Recovery Facility, which was an incineration facility that recently closed down. And so for Los Angeles County, all the way on the west side of the county, we own the Calabasas landfill. So to help develop some more infrastructure, we're proposing to develop an anaerobic digestion facility at that landfill. But before I dive more into that proposed AD facility, I wanted to talk a little bit in general about some of the challenges to building infrastructure that we've been experiencing in LA County. So definitely one of them is the impact of siting a facility. In Los Angeles County, we have the Green Zones Ordinance, which provides guidelines to ensure that facilities are sited in an equitable way and to avoid burdening communities that in the past have been disproportionately impacted by facility development. In addition, the pre-development process for organic waste processing facilities in California can take several years. It involves preliminary design, stakeholder outreach, environmental review, and permitting. And these processes can be pretty costly. Like I said, they take a long time. And then at the end of the process, there's no guarantee that the governing body of the jurisdiction is going to approve the environmental review document and allow the project to actually be built. Oops, sorry. So there's some options for expediting the siting and permitting of these facilities, such as co-locating them with existing infrastructure like landfills, materials recovery facilities, wastewater treatment plants, et cetera, because a lot of times they already have the appropriate permits, and it makes the process faster. And then in addition, SB 1383, it specifies that only certain technologies can be used to divert organic waste, and that the organic waste has to be source separated, meaning that residents and businesses have to put the organics in a separate bin at the source. And if the organics come from a mixed waste processing facility, there's very detailed certification requirements. So that makes it a little bit more challenging just because we're limited to certain technologies and processes. And also, LA County is extremely big. We have 88 cities, and our unincorporated areas are divided into 125 pockets over 2,600 square miles. So we just have to all work together with all the cities, all the waste haulers, all the facilities to get these consolidated feedstock streams to help feed these anaerobic digestion facilities. So in the region, to help encourage the development of new infrastructure, public works, we try to provide some regional leadership. We are coordinating the pre-development of the proposed Calabasas AD facility, which won't be restricted to just unincorporated county. It could be used by any jurisdiction, theoretically. And we aren't planning to stop there. We're working to identify other sites that might be suitable for similar infrastructure. So currently we're conducting a county-wide analysis of over 10,000 sites using some preliminary assessment criteria like land use, our green zones ordinance guidelines, fault lines, distance to transportation routes, and all of those various factors. And so far we've identified 55 sites that we think could potentially be viable, but of course we're going to dive in deeper and do a more robust analysis to see if we could potentially develop some organics processing infrastructure at those locations. And then in addition, we have our Southern California Conversion Technology Program. So we help provide developers with assistance on technical or economic feasibility studies for their projects. And in addition, we're looking at federal and state grant opportunities. Luckily, there's been a lot of grant opportunities coming up these days to help fund infrastructure development, and we share these opportunities with other cities, counties, waste haulers, and facility developers. And we're also continuing to work with the federal and state government to advocate for additional funding and resources. We also have a couple of different platforms where we collaborate with stakeholders from local agencies, state agencies, and private industry. We have our Integrated Waste Management Task Force Alternative Technology Advisory Subcommittee, which is a public platform. And then we also have our Infrastructure LA Sustainable Waste and Recycling Management Committee, which is a little bit more internal to talk about challenges that jurisdictions are facing in facility development. So if you're interested in participating in either of these, please contact me after my presentation, and I'd be happy to help put you in touch with these groups. All right, so I don't think I have to tell this audience this information, but as we all know, anaerobic digestion is a proven technology for processing organic waste. As we know, it produces renewable energy, it produces valuable soil amendments, diverts organic material from landfills, and reduces the emissions of methane and greenhouse gases. As we've seen, these benefits have been proven worldwide. There's thousands of AD facilities in the world, including in North America. So really, the main challenge that we're experiencing is the cost. So the tipping and processing fees for a ton of food waste could exceed $100 a ton, but in many situations, you can just landfill that material for way less, so that's kind of led to slow progress in the development of AD facilities in California. And the reason for these high tipping fees is that AD facilities require a larger capital investment than a landfill, so long-term feedstock agreements and offtake agreements are needed to ensure sufficient revenue to support these facilities. And then in addition, the organic waste a lot of times has to be pre-processed to remove the contamination and to produce an acceptable feedstock that meets the specs of the AD. In addition to actual AD facilities, there's also a need for additional pre-processing facilities, as well as some additional technologies such as thermal conversion to supplement AD to help address all of the waste stream. And then finally, there's the challenge of public acceptance. As we know, AD is used widely throughout the world, but it's relatively new in the Los Angeles region, so obtaining stakeholder acceptance is very critical to the project's success. So the county, as I said, we're hoping to lead by example to develop a proposed AD facility at the Calabasas landfill, which is located in an unincorporated area of the county. Like I said, the landfill is owned by the county, and it's operated by another public agency, the Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts. We did some preliminary feasibility analyses there over a decade ago, and we found that the site is likely suitable for a commercial scale AD facility. And at this time, we're ensuring that the pre-development activities for the project are being conducted in a transparent and inclusive manner, and ensuring that we address any potential concerns through a community-first stakeholder engagement strategy. So as we were going through these feasibility analyses, we also assessed various facility development options, and we found that the public-private partnership would be the best option. because it leverages the private sector's expertise and resources in designing, building, and operating the AD infrastructure, and it also allows for the use of private financing, which frees up public agency capital for other programs and projects. And minimizing the costs is very beneficial for a local jurisdiction because then we can pass on these cost savings to our constituents through reduced trash bills or allowing jurisdictions to buy renewable electricity and fuels at a lower cost. However, it is very important in a public-private partnership to come to an agreement on how the cost savings will specifically be used to benefit the local communities. So the county's primary role in the development of the proposed AD facility is to negotiate the lease and base operating agreements as the owner of the site with the private developer, engaging the stakeholders and overseeing and monitoring all of the pre-development activities, the environmental review, the permitting, the preliminary design, and the financing. We've also identified a lot of the community stakeholders that could be impacted and have done presentations to resident and homeowner groups. We presented to the city councils of cities that are located near the landfill. We've provided site tours to city council members and key city staff as well. And in addition, we're recommending to our Board of Supervisors that they form a community advisory committee to allow the community to provide input and feedback on the proposed AD facility throughout the development process. So the facility is currently being developed by a private developer. After a formal procurement process, we selected Energia. And currently, we are working with them through an exclusive negotiating agreement, like I said, to negotiate the ground lease, the base operating agreement, and to provide these various deliverables. After the environmental review is complete, the LA County Board of Supervisors has to approve the environmental documents and any project agreements like the lease and operating agreements. And then if they approve, Energia would be responsible for financing, designing, building, owning, and operating the proposed AD facility, of course, with monitoring and oversight from the county. So I only have a couple minutes here, but I wanted to go through some of the lessons learned in case it helps any other jurisdictions or facility developers. So of course, number one is always early and continuous stakeholder engagement. It's vital for the success of these projects. We started our engagement before we even released the RFP to make sure everyone was aware that we were even thinking about this project and introduce it to the community and give them an opportunity to voice any potential concerns so that it could be addressed throughout the pre-development process. In addition, it's important to establish effective organic waste collection programs to provide a steady and reliable source of feedstock to proposed facilities. And in addition, to write any solicitation documents to give flexibility to developers to ensure that they're able to develop a project that's financially viable and meets the needs of the local jurisdiction. And in addition, like I mentioned, there are grants and loans that are available. However, applying for these, as I can personally attest to, it takes a lot of staff time or a lot of consultant time, and in some cases, they have cost-sharing requirements as well. So we'd caution any jurisdictions that have limited resources to only apply if they're confident that they meet all the criteria. That could include feedstock agreements, it could include completion of environmental review, and that they can provide any of the cost share as well. So, as you can see, we've done a lot, but we have very, very far to go in order to close this infrastructure gap. So we're continuing to work with Energia to develop the proposed Calabasas AD. We're continuing to look into additional sites and do a more detailed analysis. And if we do find some additional sites that are viable, we plan to use the process that we've used for the Calabasas AD as a model for the pre-development of those additional sites. And we're also in discussions with our contracted waste haulers to see how much feedstock could potentially be supplied to any upcoming organic waste processing projects. And in addition, we're also working with other stakeholders like utilities or energy providers to see if they would be interested in purchasing any products like renewable fuel that's created from these AD projects. And of course, continuing to pursue grant funding and share those opportunities with other local jurisdictions. So that concludes my presentation. My contact information is here in case you're interested in collaborating with us, in case you have any questions or want to learn more about our Alternative Technology Committee or our Sustainable Waste Committee. And I think we're holding questions for the end, right?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was excellent. Thank you very much for your presentation. And we're going to wind down this first session with developing a waste conservation ecosystem with Timothy Kelley. He is President and CEO of the Imperial Valley Economic Development Corporation.
Good morning. I don't see Gene in the crowd. I was going to thank him for letting me volunteer myself. But I enjoy this conference every year. It's first of all, it's a great location, and get to meet new people and talk about something that I really enjoy and been involved in for many years. But I'm going to start off by, first of all, I want to introduce Sean Wilcock. Sean works with me at Imperial Valley Economic Development Corporation. I do have some PowerPoints. There's a couple slides that didn't make it on this presentation. And one of them has to do with a map. So how many of you are from San Diego? How many of you are from California? Okay. And how many of you not from California? Okay. So, first thing I like to start off with is where's Imperial County, and a little history. All the states in California were all, when the state was formed, all the states were developed, except a couple. And Imperial County was one of them. Imperial County was part of San Diego County. And about 1904, we had a flood. The entire Colorado River emptied into the Imperial County. And it was a time when you could not sell or buy property because you could not record it because you had to get to San Diego, but you couldn't get over the river. And so about that time, they said, we need to have our own county. And there's a book called The First 30 Years, and there's a quote in there, because they had to ask permission for San Diego to leave, or Imperial County to leave San Diego. And San Diego said, there's nothing there but water, and we can't get it. For the next 100 years, they've been fighting over the water. But we have it. It's something very unique. We get about the least rainfall in the United States. Over the last 3 weeks, I've been to 21 counties in California, and just for the heck of it, I drove through Death Valley 3 weeks ago. It was 127 degrees at 5 o'clock. That day, I think it got to 128 degrees. It's amazing how many people were walking around. Death Valley is actually not the lowest point in California. Imperial County is. It was over 100 years ago until the Salton Sea filled up. And so Salton Sea today is about 235 feet below sea level. Because of that, we bring water in from the Colorado River into the Imperial County. And the amount of water we receive per acre for agriculture is 5.3 acre feet, which is equivalent to 5.3 feet of rain. So you can imagine we receive about 3 inches per year, and we get this much rain per acre. And that's why a very unique area for agriculture. And We've used it for agriculture, and now we're using it a lot for industry and diversifying our income. So there's a couple things. First of all, the location east of here. The geography is very different. You've got a Mediterranean climate here in San Diego, and it goes up to almost an alpine climate with the trees. And then once it's like all of a sudden you get to the top of the mountains, you go a little bit further, and then you almost get into a desert climate. And you're still at 4,500 foot elevation. And then you drop right down into the desert where there's no rain, and then you get to the Imperial Valley, what we call the valley. It's all green. It's like an oasis. So the weather is very similar to Palm Springs, very similar to Phoenix, et cetera. And that's where a lot of people are moving to areas like that, and we're seeing the growth also. There's a couple things I picked up from the presentations earlier that I'll talk about, but a little bit of my background is I'm the president and CEO of the Imperial Valley Economic Development Corporation. I also head up several organizations, including an environmental justice organization. I'll talk about that later. But as the past president twice of Team California, the statewide marketing organization, so guess what I do? I go outside California and convince people they need to come here. And so I'd love to take any questions you have about the government, about California. And I'll just touch on one really quick. I was in England, London last year. I was giving a presentation, and in the presentation, are there any questions? This guy says, we heard everybody left California. And I go, yeah, all 40 million people got up and left the state all at once. And you know what there is? Empty houses, empty buildings. It's a place to go right now. So that's the perception outside California. But they say, you know, where are they going? Well, they're going to Texas. You know where the number one place people from Texas are moving to? California. So let's put things in perspective, because it's a great state. I know the challenges, but I also know the benefits, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. I'm also on the board of Kelley and California Association of Local Economic Development. So when it comes to legislation, we will work on legislation. So from this conference, if there's something that we wanted to discuss, I'd take that to the legislative body, and we would basically lobby for bills. And we also lobby against bills. So that's a big part of that organization. California Stewardship Network is an organization I'm on the board of also, and it's very similar to coming here and talking to you about, how are you resolving problems in your area? How are you finding solutions? What's working, what's not? And so it's a really good network, because I just get on the phone, I call somebody, are you doing this, are you doing that? I get phone calls all the time. How did you do this? And we really work together. And then federally, I was appointed by the Secretary of Commerce four times for the San Diego Imperial Valley District Export Council. And so if you don't know about that organization, if you've got a technology or you have a product to sell outside the United States, you make a phone call to them free of charge. They'll find markets for you that will help you sell your product overseas. It's a great organization. So I'm on the local side of that, and we got great people here in San Diego. I think we have about, I want to say 6 or 8 offices here in California. Most other states have one. If they're lucky, they have one. And so it's a great network that we have through that also. I do want to talk later on about some of the funding sources. I'll get that on the next slide. So first of all is figuring this out. So what is economic development? Why am I here? And to put it simply, from an economic development standpoint, we're trying to grow the economy. And people benefit from that, from jobs and taxes. And that's what most people are concerned about. Municipalities are concerned about taxes. How are they going to be able to generate the revenue to be able to sustain their services, their roads, et cetera? And then on the other side is for the people that live there, they need jobs. And so that's what we do at IVEDC is we attract, we retain, we expand industry. And so retention is just as important, but we spend majority of our time externally marketing, trying to bring companies to the Imperial Valley. And we do things differently from economic development organizations, kind of like there's your basic products you provide, and then there's kind of like this cafeteria menu of other things. I will say that 5 economic development organizations in San Diego County, we do everything they do in one office in Imperial County. So I think that's kind of unique. And why do we do that? Because we have to. There's just no one else to do it. And so it goes back to capacity, what's available in your area. And I think that's a big challenge in rural communities is that, by the way, most of California is rural communities. I don't know if you realize that. But the challenge of that is that it's economy of scale. You know, if you're a large city like Los Angeles or San Diego, then you've got a lot of people, a lot of services. We have to provide the same services to a population of 180,000. And so it's very difficult to be able to have the manpower, the person power in order to do that. And so which means that you have to be very diversified, a lot of cross-training. And so the services we provide in our office are much more than you would expect. And I'm not even going to talk about 90% of them. But when we talk about the services, this is what we do. And this is kind of the process and what we've learned over time. I was hired 20 years ago, said, your job is to attract industry. Okay, well, you got to attract industry, but you've got to have kind of a red team when the industry comes. And that part of that is your retention program. Because if you have a retention program, you're looking at what programs are available that can help businesses. But because if we bring a company to the Imperial County as an example, and Sean and I have done this many times, they go, okay, we brought this company, here you go. There's no one to hand it over to. So over the years, we've developed all these different programs. And you just think about it. What's the first thing people want? They want a location. They want to know what programs are available to help them benefit. What is the due diligence? How we can assist them, make sure that they're in the right location, what's available to them. Land acquisition. We work with real estate brokers. We're not in the real estate business, but who do you think the real estate brokers call when they want to do a deal? They call us. I'm not saying we know more than them, but I would say that we probably do because we work with all the brokers. We know where there's listings. We know where there's expired listings. We know properties that are for sale that are not for sale. There's no sign up. And because people will call us and we tell them, we're not in the real estate business, call that broker, or when you're ready to go, let us know and we'll hook you up with a broker to sell a property. And I think we're in an area that there's a lot of, there's 450,000 acres of agriculture land. A lot of that is being converted into industry. And so people that have 100 acres of land, they want to know, okay, what can I do with this? Well, we have the projects for them. And so that's how we fit together. And then the big thing is permit assistance. So I'm helping companies with permits. Workforce development is a big one. By the way, in California, probably the easiest money to get is workforce training programs. Just one example, we had a company that we helped get going, and they told me it was going to be about a $25 million investment, and I went through their budget and everything. I said, I think it's going to be about $45 million. And they said, if it's $45 million, we can't do it. I go, yeah, you can. We'll get you the money. And we probably raised, how much money for them? $15 million. The first $15 million they had to run their company came from us, a grant. And so we're really good at doing that stuff. Workforce training. We just got a grant with the Employment Training Panel, multiple employer contract. And so as an example, it fits right into this industry. If you were to start a company, then you're going to need workforce training. We could come in and actually manage all that workforce training for you. I sit on the Workforce Development Board. We disperse about $15 million per year in workforce training programs. That's addition to that. A lot of that is OJT, on-the-job training. And so all these things do add up. And so there's just not one thing. And then we get to the under construction. So we assist with that. We actually handle the procurement. And so a company will call us and say, we need to hire a subcontractor. We need to hire a company that will do earth moving. And then we'll get a phone call. It's like, we need tires. We need ice. We have a remote location. We need a food truck. And we do all that stuff. So we got a list of all the people. We just make a phone call. And by the way, if you work through us, there's people that aren't on our list. And the reason they're not on our list is because they kicked them off. They didn't show up. They didn't do a good job. And so we've got a really good list of contractors that we work with. So the industries that we work in, and Sean and I just yesterday were helping to finalize what's called the SEDS document, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategic Plan, which is required for Economic Development Administration projects. Workforce training programs are actually linked to the SEDS document, and we're going through a program right now which is called the California Jobs First Initiative, and that program, in my opinion, should be linked to the SEDS document also. So what was mentioned earlier about environmental justice is a real challenge. And so I told you I started an environmental justice organization called the Imperial Valley Wellness Foundation. Because what we found is there are real environmental justice organizations. They want what's good for the community. But they've learned from the environmentalist, and they've learned from the unions that they can get paid for doing what they do. And so it used to be, we learned how to work with the environmental organizations. We've learned how to work with the unions. The environmental justice organizations are really interesting because some of the ones in our area, it's like, you got a project, we're going to sue you, and you pay us, and we're fine. And so it's a big challenge throughout California, throughout the nation, and believe me, in Europe, it's a major issue, major issue. We have companies that we're working with that when they come to California, or they come to our area, someone will ask them, well, what do you think about the planning or the permitting process in California? And they go, it's nothing like Europe. So just keep that in mind. And this DEI and the environmental justice is something we need to work around. So what did I do? I formed an environmental justice organization. And what we do is we work with companies when they come in and say, look, these are the things to look out for. You're coming here because what do you want? Oh, we got this great technology. It's going to improve the environment. It's going to improve the world. Okay, great. But what's the community going to think of it? They're going to think that you're a company coming in just wanting to make money off of an area that is depressed. And so let's figure out a way that we can make sure that you're happy and they're happy and everybody's happy, but do that planning ahead of time. And we've been pretty successful with that. When people listen to us, it's good. And when they don't, then it's bad. Then we have to help clean up their messes. I mentioned the SEDS, and what's important about that is what was mentioned earlier, is that the community needs to want a project. Well, we bring the projects, the industry clusters, and we get everybody to sign off to say that this is what we want. And so these industry clusters, we've got different projects in every one of those clusters. And then when we send that to the EDA, it's gone through that first step. Does the community support this project? Is the government willing to participate? Is the private sector involved? And so it goes back to that P3 concept. And so this is something to keep in mind. If you're not familiar with the SEDS, then whatever community you're working with across the United States should have a SEDS. If they don't, you could develop one. But you don't have to go through the SEDS to get to EDA funding, okay? But it is a process. It actually shortens the time frame. So some of the funding sources that we work with to help projects get through, there's local funding we do have because we've had so much development in solar. So I don't know if you know this in California. The generation of solar is tax exempt. So a solar company comes to our area and they take agriculture land out of production and they put up solar panels, and now they don't have to pay taxes on that. So we've had some job loss, and we didn't have the tax benefit. And so we're the first county that did this. We developed a voluntary program for development in which companies can pay into this fund, and then the county disperses those funds for different purposes. And some goes to scholarships, some goes to agriculture programs, and the other one goes to economic benefits. And so that's where we'd come in, as we'd pitch projects to try to get local funding. But some of the other ones you may be familiar with is with Cal Recycle. The programs are available there. One that you may not be familiar with is North American Development Bank. How many of you heard of the North American Development Bank? Very good. They're actually having a conference at the end of this month in San Antonio. They're located in San Antonio. The North American Development Bank was developed during the time when they formed the NAFTA agreement, because communities that were along the border were going to see a lot of negative effects from pollution, waste, et cetera. Because of, small communities, all of a sudden you got 1,000 trucks going through their air quality. And so they developed a way to look at, there's an organization called BEC, which is the other side of it, Border Economic something. And they would do the studies for programs, and then North American Development Bank would fund the projects. And so the money actually comes from EPA. The first project for North American Development Bank was in the city of Brawley, a wastewater treatment plant. And we're working on a project right now adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant, which I'll talk about later, right now that's going through. Then the USDA. So a lot of people think USDA is agriculture. Who knows what the majority of money for USDA goes toward? It actually goes to SNAP and food stamps and those types of things. But agriculture programs. But the other thing, it's kind of like USDA rural development is like the SBA of rural communities. So we not only have SBA, Small Business Administration, we also have redevelopment, USDA. And so one of the programs we administer out of our office is the REAP program, Renewable Energy for America, which is a great program. So we assist clients, we help them, introduce them to to a location and then help them with the financing and then introduce them to the REAP program. And there's several other grants that we work with USDA. So I'm probably leaving some out. Am I leaving some out, Sean? Yeah, there's a lot more than that. But what we find is that people just aren't familiar with the programs. So over time, then, I walked into a meeting one time and we talked about all the success we're having at IVEDC attracting businesses, and somebody asked me, well, what are you doing for the little people? It's like, you didn't hire me to work with the little people. You hired me to bring in a big business, and I did that. And they go, well, that's not good enough. So we started what's called the Imperial Valley Business Resource Center, and because there's a lot of grants that are available, so we run a lot of those grants through our 501c3, and there's a lot of services that we provide. And it's kind of interesting because we were running the Small Business Development Center. We felt that it was very confining. It was kind of like there's a lot we couldn't do. And our success had been linking IVEDC with the SBDC. And so we thought we could do a lot more. And so we actually formed what was going to be, we got a grant from the USDA to form a virtual economic development organization, which we called the Imperial Valley Business Resource Center. And this just wasn't done before, believe it or not. The things being done virtually. And this is about 2018. We got it funded, ready to go virtually, and guess what happened? COVID hit, and we were virtual. So it was really good for us because people were calling us. We just said, go to our website, go online, fill out these forms. And so it really did work well, and we connected with IVEDC. And I will tell you that during COVID, best years of my life. We actually did more PPP in our office than all of San Diego County combined, EIDL loans. You know why? Because we were open. We were ready for business. And so that was a real success. And so I bring that up because we're ready for business for you. So I mentioned, California, we get a really bad rap about doing business. And so, I asked, Sean and I, we didn't bring it today, but we usually carry this packet around because I go to these conferences and the trade shows and people see my name, oh, you're from California? You can't get a project done there. And I go, really? Want to see the projects we got done? So in the last 20 years, we've done about $20 billion of projects, almost $1 billion per year. It's, 500 million would be a slow year, $1.5 billion would be a big year. And when I go around the state and even around the country, that's just unheard of. And for a community our size, that's huge. And so the industry clusters that I mentioned, we've been working on those for 15 years. Maybe we added one. You notice recycling was on there. We've always been a big proponent of recycling. But because we just felt we're in a perfect situation for that. But what's interesting about that is that all of these industry clusters today are all firing at the same time, every single one of them. And so it's really interesting because if anybody's ever heard of Lithium Valley, that's what everybody's talking about, and that's great. But we spend about 20% of our time on that. That means we spend 80% of our time on other things. And so we'll get to that. But what's the biggest issue in doing business in California? It's rezoning property. So when somebody says, I can't get this property rezoned, I can't get this property permitted, it's taking forever. We thought it was going to be like 2 years, and it's been 20 years, and we can't get it done. You know what we did? Is we rezoned all the property. So these are what are called specific planned areas. And so if you can imagine inside a city, you've got an industrial park, and this is what you can do in an industrial park. This is a 6,000 acre industrial park. And it's specifically planned, the different parcels tell you what you can do. And the majority of this particular industrial site is medium and heavy manufacturing. So M2 is medium, M3 is heavy. You could pretty much do everything on an M3 except for what, Sean?
Automotive recycling.
Yeah. And so we'll get to that later, but there's a reason why. It's really the dismantling of automobiles, and that's because we have two automobile dismantlers in this area. They're just horrible. And so when they developed the specific planned area, they said, we don't want those there. And so it's kind of funny because we have a company that we've been working with, and we identified different sites for them, and they said, oh, we went ahead and we bought this property. It's down there on the bottom right corner. And we go, okay, that's great. What are you going to do there? Auto dismantling. I go, wow, that's great. There's only one thing you can't do there, and that's auto dismantling. They say, oh, shoot. So anyway, there's something for everybody, but in that particular specific planned area, you can't. So we've got energy projects there. We have renewable energy projects there. And like I said, this is about is it 6,000 acres? Yeah, 6,000 acres. What's that? 5,100 acres in specific plan and another about 3,000 acres in a general plan. And so what general plan means, it's a difference of, in the specific planned area, you go in, you pull your permits, and it could take you 6 weeks, and you start construction. General planned area, you have to convert that to industrial, but it's saying it's going to be industrial in the future, so it's going to take a lot less time. If you go beyond that, it could take you 3 years. Okay, so that's the difference. 6 weeks, 6 months, 3 years. And so where do you want to go? To a specific planned area. And so it really has to do with the zoning, but I'll get to something later in about the zoning. But you can see the diversity of this and the large parcels. A small parcel here is a few acres, a large parcel, probably the largest parcel is about 230 acres. Okay, this is one parcel that should interest you, that is in this industrial park, and it was zoned as a MRF. As you can see, it's got a 5-year solid waste facility permit, just redone, correct? Conditional use permit, fully permitted by Cal Recycle, and they can take 1,500 yards per day. The next one is Gateway to the Americas, which is about 3,500 acres. And they're seeing a lot of activity. In the last 20-some years, we've built about 2.5 million square feet in this industrial park. This year, we built 2.5 million square feet. Next year, we're building 2.5 million, and the next year, 5 million. So we're seeing a lot of activity. What's the interest of this? It's the east port of entry for Mexico. This is one of the busiest ports with Mexico from the United States. And Mexico is now United States' #1 trading partner, and we're seeing an increase. We just expanded this port, and we just increased. It's always been a great port to cross, much better than other ports along the border. We just increased capacity for freight by 60% and by passengers by 40% 2 weeks ago. So it was already good, now it's great. I've got a Sentry, it usually takes me 1 to 5 minutes to cross this border. Lithium Valley, what we're doing is we're developing a new specific plan, and this represents, is this the 10,000? Okay, so this is 51,000 acres. What we're doing right now is 10,000 acres. That will be, and we're putting everything in there. And this is the good part about a specific planned area. We say, this is what we want to go in there. We want recycling to go in there. We want battery manufacturing. We want mineral extraction. We want geothermal. We already have a geothermal overlay and an energy overlay, but now we're adding everything to it. This will be done in the next couple of weeks, the 10,000 acres. But when we go to the 51,000 acres, shouldn't take us another year or two, because we've already kind of done all the base work. Okay, and the RMDZ, if you're familiar with that, the Recycled Material Marketing Development Zone, there's several throughout the state of California. I just kind of, I don't know, about 10 or 12 years ago, just found out about the RMDZ, and I go, man, we need an RMDZ. So I went to the state, and they said, we have a limit how many we can have, and so you're going to have to wait. And then I got a phone call back from the state, and they said, you know what? We're looking at we're looking at Chula Vista's RMDZ, and they included, when they did their original application, Imperial County. So if you're willing, all you have to do is a program EIR, and you could be part of their zone. And so we did that. It's been a great collaboration. You know what? They manage it, and we get the benefit of it, which is great. So what I wanted to mention about this, our entire county is in the RMDZ. And I mentioned the specific planned areas, but what I didn't mention is throughout the county, there's a lot of industrial land that's on agricultural land. The reason why is because we used to have 70 cotton gins in our county. That's just an example. 70 cotton gins, each one of them is zoned for industrial. And so we did a program EIR, and any industrial land in the Imperial County is included in that. And that means that it's just like in a specific planned area, you can go to there and you can build a facility. If it doesn't meet the requirements of that property, we can do a conditional use permit. Okay, so just a couple of things. This is one of the projects that is already permitted, ready to go. It's about $1 billion, $2 billion. And we have 2 projects. It's going to be aviation fuels. One is fat oil and grease. The other one's going to be green waste. So we're probably waiting on the final funding on this project to start construction. And that's in the Mesquite Lake, by the way. And then this is a project I've been working with Clean Water Ventures. So remember, I mentioned the District Export Council. So one of the things, so because of the restrictions in California, a lot of people think you don't want to go there. But the reality is if you can get done in California, you can go anywhere. If you're in Europe and you say, oh, we got this done in California, it's like, okay, come to Europe. We can get it done there too. So this company I've been working with, we have one project almost ready to go in Brawley, California. And then we're going to go every city in the Imperial County. They'll be taking the wastewater, cleaning it up, producing distilled water, producing energy, and producing hydrogen. And so we'll have hydrogen outlets and generation in every city in our county and the county facilities. And then I want to take this statewide, and I want to take it nationwide, and I want to take it globally. And so it's modular, which means that for small communities, you basically design the system for whatever the wastewater is. It doesn't have to be wastewater, it could be any water. And then this one, I wish I had the overhead, but this is a facility that's owned by LA Sanitation. And how many acres is this, Sean? So 2,500 acres. It can handle 3 unit trains per day, 5 unit trains per day. It's permitted, let me get my notes really quick. It's permitted for 20,000 tons per day, 600 tons of ash, 4,000 municipal solid waste, 220 trucks from LA and 50 from Imperial. And it is now zoned for, is now permitted through 21-22. Permitted, ready to go, never taken an ounce of trash. And what we're trying to develop here is a recycled zone that, and we've already got it permitted to export commodities, hay commodities out of Imperial County. We're now going to do other products out of Mexico. And what we want to do is be able to design this specifically around recycling. And so it's pretty remote. It's in the desert, but there is a rail going to it. And there's a pretty good road access also. And then this is another company that last year we attracted to the Imperial County, and they're taking batteries and basically tearing those apart, taking all the products. I think we know one thing about lithium. It's 100% recyclable. So if you can extract it from a battery, you can put it right back in a battery. And so this is pretty exciting. It's the city of Hopeville, and they're already developing, but they'll probably be in operation in a couple months. So great thing about California, we've got these great restrictions. The problem is you just can't do a lot of this stuff in the state. And so you can in some places if you know where to go. And that's me. I think I did have some more notes, but I think we'll take some questions later on. I did mention the environmental justice, how to work with them. My final conclusion is last night I was watching the news, and there was on the news, there's a guy named Brian Bilbray. Does anybody know who he was? Brian Bilbray was the mayor of Imperial Beach. And they kept shutting down Imperial Beach. Every time Tijuana River overflowed, they would shut down Imperial Beach. And so he went down there with a bulldozer and filled in the Tijuana River. Of course, they arrested him, threw him in jail. He became kind of a hero. And so the Tijuana River is probably the dirtiest river in North America. The second and the third are the New River and Alamo River in Imperial County. Sources of water come from Mexico. So it's been a big challenge for us, but he was on the news last night because they're trying to permit a landfill in the South Bay, 400 acres, and it's going to be on the ballot in November to not allow that to happen. So if we don't have landfills, if we don't have a place to put things, where are we going to take them? We can't put them in the ocean. We're going to take them to Arizona. So when we're talking about, global warming, climate change, and all this stuff, what we're doing here, if somebody else is doing something, if we're reducing what we're doing here, that means somebody else is doing more of it there. And we've experienced that. So we got to do what we can locally, but we're actually working on legislation not to allow the export of trash and outside of California, because we need that. The Recycled Market Development Zone is to be able to take product that's been used in California and repurpose it here in California. It creates jobs, it's good for us. And what are we doing? We're just exporting all this stuff to other states or other counties. So I just wanted to bring that up because it's something that's very current. Brian Bilbray went on to be a congressman for many years and is still very active in the environmental world. He was the surfer mayor. And by the way, today, one of the top 5 beaches in all the United States consistently is Coronado. Over the last couple of years, Coronado Beach has been closed on and off because of pollution coming from Mexico. So we got some challenges. And a lot of the technologies that we'll be talking about here can be taken to other countries, so we're excited to be able to do that. Thank you very much. I hope to take some questions later.
Okay, thank you very much. So the work is going to go around with the microphone. If you have a question for any of the panelists, you raise your hand, identify the panelist or panelists, like that. And he'll get the microphone with you.
Dr. Neal, Kawsar, is that how I say your name? How do I say your name? Kawsar. This is for both Kawsar and Timothy. So the Waste by Rail program in California was prevented bringing waste from Los Angeles County to Mesquite Regional Landfill. Have there been efforts to remediate those efforts? Because in doing these large-scale waste-to-energy projects, you need consistent feedstock.
I can answer that first for LA County. So we do prepare some plans, like I mentioned. We recently completed an update to the Los Angeles County countywide siting element, which is our disposal planning for the next 15 years. I'm not completely familiar with that document, but I believe it may address some of the questions about Mesquite, but you follow up with me after, I can point you in the right direction.
And can I just add to that? So,
just if you could please talk closer to the mics because we are doing the recording. Thank you.
So on the Imperial County side, it's permitted and it's built. And over the last few years, you could go there today and actually dump. We'd love to have the tipping fees, and everything goes along with truck traffic. It's kind of like Mexicali is a really big maquiladora area, and I don't know if you know this, but between LA and Mexicali is probably one of the top aerospace locations in the world, which means that Imperial County is along the aerospace corridor. It's just one problem: the trucks don't stop. So we're working on facilities to be able to capture the supply chain going from Mexicali to LA and back. But with the Mesquite Lake, over the last few years, we've got this facility that's ready to go. It can take unit trains. It has. A lot of the windmills that are in the mountains in San Diego and Imperial County were all delivered at that facility and then trucked to their final location. There's been some other things that we brought in there, and we do have been rezoned to be able to export agriculture commodities. Hasn't happened yet because we have another facility in Imperial County which probably takes 3 unit trains a week going out to the Port of LA and 3 unit trains coming in bringing in corn. But that facility is ready to go, and I think we're in the process right now of rezoning it so we can export to commodities come out of Mexico. Even though we got this great port of entry, a lot of the businesses in Mexico don't want to put their containers on a train in Mexico and bring it into the United States. They want to bring it over by truck and put it on a train. And so that's what we're designing that for. So we'd like to do more, and so what the concept Sean and I have, we've met with LA Sanitation about this, is to be able to use that concept, whether it's truck or rail, to be able to bring waste in and repurpose that waste. The 2,500 acres is a pretty large site.
Yeah. I think the main issue was MSW coming from Los Angeles County into there by rail, if I remember right.
Yeah, and MSW is permitted, and let me get the numbers for you really quick.
Well, it's permitted on site, but they had trouble on the rail transport.
I think the issue is cost, and I think when they were permitting that site, then dumping fees in Los Angeles were about $45 and increasing, and then the recession hit, and because of a lot of legislation about landfill diversion, and also because of less construction, then the landfills weren't being utilized, and so they were able to extend their contracts, and the price went down. And so I heard as low as $25. I don't know what it is today, but at one time they're saying that waste by rail was going to be about $75 per ton. I don't know what it is, but that's what they were talking about. So they were looking at that projection of what the cost was going to be, and it would hit a point when it made sense, and maybe it doesn't make sense now, but the trains are getting bigger. And so that's the other thing, is that the way we're moving product is getting less expensive, plus the mandates that are required.
Well, on the topic of cost, when you add an alternate source of income on the other end of the rail line, which would be Mesquite landfill, by instead of letting it become a landfill and allow it to become a waste conversion hub that's generating income, by producing energy or syngas or biofuels at the other end. It becomes a very compelling story to be able to take such massive amounts of waste that all your guys' technologies requires, and taking that large volume of waste into an area that your technologies can be permitted because it's out in the middle of nowhere. Nobody's going to complain about it, even though there is zero emissions as possible. But it's really a unique location that, where else can you have the volumes from LA County in an area where you can get your projects permitted? And then you create that revenue stream on the other end that helps subsidize the cost of railing trash.
We have other questions? If you raise your hand, this gentleman can get you the microphone.
Yeah, my question is for Kawsar. As you develop all of these, all this gas, is there any part of the equation in utilizing that gas to produce power, especially?
I'm sorry, they utilize what?
The gas that you're creating in the digesters. I mean, most wastewater treatment plants, landfills, they're just burning it. They're not making power with it.
So for SB 1383, there's a couple of different components when it comes to facilities. So first, it's that the facilities need to divert the organic waste away from landfills, and then also need to create a product that local jurisdictions can procure. So that could include renewable gas that's injected into the pipeline or used to create transportation fuel or electricity. And then with anaerobic digestion, there's also some residual solids that can be used to make a soil amendment. So because of the SB 1383 procurement requirement, there's definitely a big regulatory driver to actually procure these materials instead of just like flaring any energy that's produced.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I'd like to hear more about strategies to address the net zero emissions constraints that we're seeing in some states for these technologies to be employed, if there are any.
So from what I've seen, some of the states are trying to move to ban any waste to energy or conversion technologies as a method of controlling emissions and what that can drive. And I know a number of the technology providers may be able to provide an answer for that with waste to fuels once that becomes scalable and the technology's commercially demonstrated, the infrastructure's there, and the purchase of that renewable fuel is available. One of the things some of our clients have talked about is renewable natural gas stations for their municipal and state fleets and school bus fleets. I know we've had a jump to the electrification of vehicles, and I think that we've seen a jump to the electrification of vehicles that are primarily sourced after an 85% carbon grid. So what are we really doing there is what some of these clients are talking about, and how do we talk about renewable natural gas and other clean fuels? Hydrogen's a long way down the road. I know here in California you've made developments in that, but that is what they're doing. They're looking at bans of waste to energy, waste conversion technology. Anything with a stack is no good, and then they focus on the traditional industries that have stacks for their processes, which have sometimes nothing to do with waste. That's where they're also regulating. And then they have offsets project offsets. New York is a good example. They won't let a biosolids project waste energy be an offset for the carbon. So it's interesting. It's going to be a challenge, but I think that some of the technology providers in this room have some very viable solutions that we see, especially as we on the back end we're able to scrub and clean the gases and control the emissions. I know 20 years ago when we were working on some of these projects, we were then looking at thermal processes that met the Kyoto Accords at the time. Now we've replaced Kyoto Accords with the Paris Accords, but we're looking at projects that are below the emission limits that are otherwise allowable under existing law. But you have these projected legislative changes going forward that say, well, by 2050, these are going to be the emission standards. Well, they're not. Whatever is permitted now in a regulatory standard, if your technologies can meet the emission standards that are in the US EPA's Clean Air Act and California's, which show California emissions always been ahead of the rest of us, if you can meet that and the environment can take that, then you should be able to permit these technologies. And I think that's some of the problem we're seeing is they're regulating today's projects by tomorrow's standard. And the reason is, I mentioned before, because of finance. If I'm going to finance a project for 25 years and the emissions do not meet the targets at that time, that's where the challenge is. And I'd be happy to hear from some of the scientists as well on this. That's a policy lawyer's standpoint.
You've mentioned finance a bit, but I'm also thinking about insurance. And so many of these projects, new projects, may find it difficult to gain the insurance that they need to do business with municipalities. Can you guys, any of you on the panel, address this aspect and how your groups might assist technology providers or new processes in mitigating some of those difficulties?
Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of great tangible information to add. As I mentioned, we have an exclusive negotiating agreement with our developer, and of course, one of the aspects that is to be negotiated is the insurance requirements, but I can say from a local jurisdiction perspective, we usually have pretty robust guidelines from our chief executive officer of insurance requirements for various types of projects, but I certainly understand that the insurance requirements can be challenging, but perhaps some of the other panelists have some better guidance to provide.
One of the things we always look at is whether a project's scalable, whether it's financeable, whether it's insurable. And the risk, and that insurance risk factor can usually be factored into the cost of the project. And then insuring projects is a matter of the cost of that risk, who will absorb that risk, and then in the pro forma, whether your project can afford the cost of that insurance. And I think some of them will and some of them won't. I think I have.
Yeah, this is for all the panelists. Imperial County would be awesome if it were in a different state. But unfortunately, one of the big problems, because I've been to Mesquite, I've been to Bolo, I've been to all these great project locations in California. California could be the leader in the country about waste conversion. Unfortunately, there is one man who's been holding the line for decades now on ignoring science and making waste diversion to any kind of thermal conversion technology essentially illegal and impossible in California. That's why Mesquite's sitting there unused. And the problem is Kip Lipper, our unofficial senator for California, has been basically carrying the water for the waste industry, his buddies, for years, which keeps landfills incredibly profitable, doing what they've been doing, and prevents any change. And this has been going on for years. We've tried lobbying, we've tried all kinds of things, but he's firmly in their pocket, and it's been going on a long time. But the problem is, until conversion credits can be counted, you're not going to do anything. You got exported out of state, and it still won't count. So California is trapped by one man.
Yeah, let's talk about that later, but I'm involved, as I mentioned, I'm involved with Kelley, and I participate. I go to the League of Cities, CSAC, RCRC, And so I think we're sitting in this room and we're around our peers, and we think about, okay, we need to have our lobbyist go to Sacramento. Well, no, we don't need our lobbyist. We need our lobbyist talking to the other lobbyist and going in force, because it's not an issue for the industry, it's an issue for the municipalities. And just if you've ever heard of CSAC, every county in California is a member of CSAC, but only 38 counties are a member of RCRC. There's a whole nother level of lobbying that can occur there. And so I think, I'm on the board of Kelley, and we actually just had this discussion last week about how we work with the other organizations, because if we got a hot topic that's holding us back, we're more powerful united. And in California, it's not 100% of the Senate or the Assembly are, anti-business. It's just more than 51%. So we just got to convince a couple Assembly members, or get a couple Assembly members or senators elected to overcome a lot of the challenges that we're having. But I'm totally with you. I think that we've talked about some of these challenges. Maybe we just have the wrong approach, and maybe that approach is having a more united approach with not only the industry, but with these other organizations, because the municipalities are suffering, because what do they do with their trash? And guess what's going on? The cost is going up. And people don't realize that it's the cost of water, it's the cost of energy, it's the cost of trash. All these things keep adding up, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And who's suffering? I can afford it, but I know my neighbor can't.
Well, I bet those folks from Texas that are moving here can afford it, is my guess. You pointed out, Tim. That was great. Thanks for a good answer, because it's always a difficult question in between the industries and how to deal with the landfill question. And also the landfill emission. I mean, the service emission of methane is a big problem. And when you pointed out earlier that they're just flaring a lot of that gas in these plants, that brings us to everything seems there's a balance somewhere, as Tim talked about, getting all those groups together. That's great. Thank you, everybody. I think we had a great panel. We had great questions. Now we can get next door for a little while with a break with, as Gene said, our very important sponsors and exhibitors who make this conference possible. Spend some time chatting with them. I know I always learn a lot over there.